Very grateful. You're a f***ing hypocrite.
Most people think Tony Soprano's worst crimes were the murders. They're wrong. His most shocking act wasn't even illegal. When measuring the moral abyss of Tony Soprano, the temptation is always to start with the obvious.
Forget about the way that Tony Soprano makes his way in the world. That's just to feed his children.
The murders, the betrayals, the hypocrisy layered thicker than Carmela's ziti. Yet strangely, the conversation often circles back to something both more banal and more damning.
Here, but the man is a sociopath, unpracticed in not getting what he wants.
The moments when Tony exercised pure malice, not out of necessity, but because he could. His worst crimes are not simply the bodies he left behind, but the lives he crushed in cold daylight while telling himself it was just business. Take the neighborhood sale. For all his talk of tradition, culture, and loyalty,
it's come to our attention this site is employing...
Tony cashed out his own backyard with the enthusiasm of a real estate broker on commission.
Have him grab up these 4 houses on Garside Street for 125 grand a piece.
It wasn't a crime by law, which makes it all the more grotesque. Men who had bled for him were discarded like garbage, so he could line his pockets. The culture he claimed to protect, bulldozed. But don't worry, Jamba Juice got its lease. The irony is that Tony's most vile act, as some call it, was perfectly legal. The mafia code collapses faster than a gabagool sandwich when loyalty comes second to real estate equity. And yet, murder. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Tony was a serial killer by any measure. The man's body count soared into double digits, but fans debate whether selling a block of property was somehow worse than bludgeoning Ralphie to death.
But to whack the guy over a horse, how fucked up is that?
It can happen to him, it can happen to any of us.
And yes, Ralphie's end was over a horse. Tony never followed the rules of the game when it didn't suit him, killing a made man not for honor or profit, but because Ralphie annoyed him. The horse was just the excuse. Still, murder alone isn't the whole measure. Consider his treatment of Christopher Moltisanti. Christopher was a junkie, a liability, a problem, but also family.
A tree limb came into the car window, completely destroyed the baby seat.
Tony smothered him after a car crash, then whined about the funeral like it was an inconvenience.
Jesus, this is some pretty fucking amazing dope. Chris said you two...
Only to soothe his grief by betting Christopher's Vegas fling. This wasn't just ruthless, it was sociopathic. His apathy toward a man who had given him loyalty for years underscored the truth.
They put him on a corrections bus this morning.
Tony loved no one but himself, perhaps his children, and even that love was poisoned by control. Speaking of control, Tony was his mother's son. Just as Livia Soprano weaponized spite, Tony lived to sabotage anyone who dared inch toward stability.
Mahatma Gandhi over here. Nice.
Janice is the prime exhibit. At a dinner where she had, by some miracle, tamed her legendary temper, Tony deliberately set her off for sport. It wasn't strategy or necessity, it was cruelty for its own satisfaction. The scene promised redemption, both for Janice and Tony, and instead delivered a reminder. He'd rather burn progress to the ground than let anyone, especially family, escape his grip. He was never happier than when pulling someone back into the pit.
Stop dumping! Stop dumping!
What does matter?
Lower your bed!
And then there's the asbestos dumping. Of all the toxic waste Tony spread through North Jersey, none was more literal. Paid to dispose of hazardous material, he pocketed the money and dumped it in the dirt, poisoning the very world he lived in. It was one of the few acts that transcended mob business and crossed into a crime against humanity. Southern Italy still suffers the consequences of such mafioso shortcuts, skyrocketing cancer rates, birth defects, poisoned soil. But Tony got his cut, so what did it matter? It was murder on a mass scale, but without the cinematic close-up of a bullet to the head. Even when not actively killing, Tony's pettiness destroyed lives.
What about you moving to Florida?
Did he say if he's leaning one way or the other?
He denied Eugene Pontecorvo the chance to leave for Florida, condemning a minor player to such hopelessness that suicide was the only exit. He sabotaged Bobby Bacala by forcing him into his first kill as revenge for losing a fistfight, an initiation delivered decades late and solely out of spite.
Reese Spatafor came to see me. She wants 100 grand to relocate on account of Vito Jr.
He gambled away money earmarked for Vito Jr.'s relocation, sending a vulnerable kid into a brutal reform program that amounted to child abuse. These weren't the cost of doing business. They were deliberate acts of cruelty carried out in broad daylight.
You're a good guy, and I'm very grateful.
You're a fucking hypocrite. Like, 'cause every time we watch Godfather, those assholes who tried to kill his dad, and you say it's your favorite scene of all time.
And the hypocrisy was endless. He berated Artie for rent he himself refused to pay. He shook down a paramedic in a hospital bed, terrorized Assemblyman Zellman with a belt, destroyed Hesch's trust with extortion, and ruined the marriage of a man already broken by gambling.
Bullshit, you're a fucking hypocrite.
The fuck did you say?
You preach all this wise guy shit.
He called out others for weakness while swimming in it himself. He claimed to value loyalty, but loyalty meant nothing when it stood in the way of money or ego.
Why? I don't have to go to school. I'm suspended.
Even his family, the one group he pretended to cherish, were collateral damage.
Fool.
You're a fucking hypocrite.
Meadow and AJ grew up with no stability, no moral compass, and no chance at normalcy.
That is so fucking racist.
Happens to be a fact.
You are such a hypocrite.
They were the most enduring casualties of his reign. Children born into wealth, but starved of guidance. Destined to stumble through life, crippled by their father's narcissism.
Years old. Say I'm helping him decorate. I bring AJ with me.
Carmela's complicity only added to the rot. But Tony was the source. He destroyed his children not with bullets, but with neglect, control, and the kind of hypocrisy that hollows a soul from the inside. The devil is always in the details. Throwing out Bobby's beloved sandwich, mocking Janice's self-improvement,
It's like an ad for a fucking weight loss center.
lording power over subordinates just to watch them squirm. These petty humiliations were as revealing as the murders. They proved that Tony Soprano was not merely a mob boss, but a connoisseur of cruelty, deriving as much satisfaction from small acts of sabotage as from grand displays of violence.
Everything this family has comes from the work I do.
All right, Tony, that's enough.
In the end, the debate over Tony's worst act misses the point. His murders were sometimes impulsive, even understandable within his twisted world.
So this group you got now, the Urban Housing League.
His business deals were calculated betrayals disguised as progress. But his true legacy was the sum of every petty humiliation, every cold choice, every scrap of humanity he set fire to in order to feed his control and his ego.
I don't want to know.
In his bathrobe at 7 o'clock in the evening.
The devil didn't need a pitchfork. He just needed a bathrobe, a plate of eggs, and the certainty that everyone around him would suffer so long as he stayed on top.
Because my name ends in a vowel. Undershirts, yelling. Hollywood tries to give these sociopaths the tragic grandeur of Al Pacino.
Tony Soprano was not a tragic anti-hero. He was a monster who thrived on legality when it suited him, illegality when it profited him, and cruelty at all times. To meet him was to have the worst day of your life.
You are sinking this whole family into your misery with your wallowing and your complaining.
To love him was to invite ruin, and to excuse him, even in fiction, is to miss the dark genius of his character. That the most unforgivable sins are not always the ones with blood on the floor, but the ones committed with a smile, a shrug, and a perfectly legal deed. Tony's legacy was cruelty. Mine's just Sopranos breakdowns. Subscribe, and we'll keep peeling back the mask.